EDGEy Conversations. Today, we are talking about what is in the mindset. This one's a really tricky one because EDGEy's been around for a decade. So you would think that we would know what the mindset is. And people kept on asking us what the mindset is. So today we're going to discuss it because what is in the mindset? It's been really quite interesting for us because we've been seeing some common things that have popped up as challenges around the mindsets, and two main ones have really risen to the top. Number one, validation. Every new innovator, every new idea, they're always craving being told that it's actually a good idea. And it's hard to see the forest for the trees when you're in there to even identify that it's a good idea. So validation and kind of that confidence piece is number one, that as edgy folks, we've been seeing and people go, oh, wow, you think it's a good idea too? Now I'll do it. So that confidence piece is really huge. The second thing that has really come up time and time again is actually the harder of the two, I think. Well, we can discuss that, is the ability to relinquish control. So we've had traditions, we've had things the way it is. Someone comes with a new idea and we're like, can I really let that happen? And so that ability to relinquish control comes up. And the interesting thing of those two, so confidence and an inability to relinquish control, I was asked, well, where do they come together? And that's where we were able to say, you know what? The mindset is actually curiosity. How are you guys feeling about that? Curiosity is the mindset.
Yeah, well, as you were talking, Carla, a number of things. Definitely curiosity is like right at the heart of the condition for effective change leaders, right? If we knew it, we'd be there. The United Church of Canada has been in decline since 1965. If we knew what it was, we'd be there. How do we find out? Well, you got to be curious. If you're afraid, you're not going to be curious. If you're trying to control things, you're not going to be curious. If you're trying to give the heart jolt to the dead horse, you're not going to be curious, and you're not going to get there. It's kind of Otto Scharmer, Leading from the Emerging Future, right? Let go of the mind, the heart and the will in order to be curious of what's happening in the moment and like what's emerging. God's up to something. We got to be curious. That's our theology. It's not we have a mission. It's God has a church to do a mission. So I like, we're just in Easter season starting, and that he has gone ahead of you to Galilee. He is not here. He's not here. So, right, God's ahead of us. So we need to be curious to find out where God's up to something in the neighborhood and get in. But, well, that's enough for now. Sam, what do you think?
As you were just talking about, we've been in decline, and if we had the answers, the quote that kept coming back to me, and I can't remember exactly who said it. I want to say it might've been Einstein, but I can't actually remember, was like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So that's just immediately when you were talking what I was thinking of, and how we do spend a lot of our energy saying, try something new. But then when Carla was talking about the validation, it's hard even for us as the team, when we're mandated to try new things, we still need the validation. So to have the local congregations on the ground also doing it, that's such a huge part of being able to take that leap of faith. But I think curiosity, if you have that innately in you and you are curious, that's what will push you forward, and that will validate yourself slightly to be able to say, you know what, I'm still curious. I want to know, regardless if X, Y, and Z think it's okay, I want to see what happens. So that innate curiosity is definitely crucial to even taking that first step.
Big question that comes up from all of this is because I've been hearing like, okay, so that first step, but then like continuing to be curious. So that's kind of an interesting piece, because we say about the mindset change. And as soon as you change your mindset, you can't go back. And yet there was this other feeling of like, well, once you find the next thing and you're like, well, maybe that's the answer. And so now I'm going to stick on that. But if you stick on it, then you're no longer curious anymore. So there seems to be two interesting pieces. It's like, becoming curious and then staying curious. And this idea of curiosity as a spiritual practice, because once it happens, then how do you continue to have that happen? So I feel like there's two sticking points here that are really tough. I don't know, you guys have one that you think's harder, or like any best practices as curiosity as a spiritual practice?
I would say reflection definitely helps continue to spur that. Because I agree, if you're just curious about one thing and you stick to it, are you continuing to develop your curiosity beyond now? Maybe you've developed tunnel vision. So to really keep reflecting, self-reflection, group reflection, whatever it may be, your team reflection, and coming up with different inquiry projects of yourself or questions about the direction you're going on is one of the best practices to continue to foster that curiosity. Because if you are curious once, take that first step, and then never think about it again, you are on one path. And maybe there's another path that you haven't seen yet. So if you continue to reflect where you are and take breaks and sit back, you're likely to maybe think of an idea you haven't thought of. Our own staff meetings, when we start reflecting about things, we think we're headed in this direction, and then we have 4 or 5 different people say something else, and we suddenly no longer have a roadmap at all. But I think that's what makes our team such an interesting dynamic, is that you do have different opinions, and we are curious in different directions. And we talk a lot about following the energy and following the spirit. And if you're not asking those questions, and if you're not engaging in that kind of reflective practice, how are you chasing that spirit or chasing that energy or following it?
Yeah, I so love that you, totally agree, Sam. And I so love, Carla, that you named curiosity as a spiritual practice, because I think people are naturally curious, but we shut it down when we're afraid. And when we're afraid, we go to control. And when you're if you're afraid to fail, if you're afraid the church is no longer relevant, if you're afraid people don't care, you're not going to be curious. You're going to be striving, grasping for something. So I think spiritual practice and spiritual groundedness is faith is the antidote to fear. Whatever spiritual practice, and then the other thing that comes to mind is the mindset of control and getting it right, and that's also not a relational stance. That curiosity, affirmation, the release of the need for control, these are all requirements for relationship, for any healthy relationship anyway. So, the United Church of Canada, our ecclesiology is that we're church through the community, like Christ is present in the bonds of the community as we're open, honest, compassionate, and striving with each other. Like striving for justice is not a clean experience. It's not without its tensions. Let's put it that way. So spiritual practice generally, to stay spiritually grounded, I think Brene Brown would call it open-heartedness, right? Release the fear, release the shame, or whatever it is. And there's a lot of shame. I hear grandparents feeling ashamed that their kids and grandkids are not in the church. So spiritual practice, and that staying connected with the source of all this is part of that, for me, part of the spiritual practice of maintaining curiosity.
So I love the relational piece about this, because really to affect change, right, with the curious is to be willing to be changed ourselves. That's what I'm hearing from that. And then that first leap of being, the leap of faith of being curious, how much bravery that actually takes. So there's some key pieces in there. What I also heard Samantha, when you were talking about our EDGE staff meetings and how we're all willing to be changed and how you can't have an expectation of where we're headed, that made me start thinking about the culture of curiosity. So we've talked about it as an individual. So we have to be brave. We have to keep on being willing to be changed and open to being curious. But as a culture of curiosity, as maybe a community of faith, as a community ministry, as a general council office, as a regional council, how do we do a culture of curiosity? How does it go from individual to the collective experience of this? How might that be possible?
I think Rob started to touch on that with relationships, and it's your relationship with yourself and your spiritual grounding, but it's also the bravery, as we're naming it, to allow someone else's curiosity to influence you or to inspire you as well. Because I think it is easy to also get caught up in, if you self-affirm that, because I'm curious, I'm brave and I'm taking the right first step. But in a relationship, in a community, you have to listen to the other people's bravery and their curiosity and embrace that maybe they're conflicting at times and find ways to work together and be open. Because if you don't have that openness, and if you don't accept someone else's curiosity as also valid, then you're still holding control, regardless if you think you're brave for having your own curiosity, you're holding control if you don't accept someone else's.
Yeah, totally. This is taking me in what might seem like a bit of a left turn, like Sam was referencing in our staff meetings, but like curiosity opens us to joy. It opens us to surprise, and it opens us to relationship. And in that relationship, in the connectedness, right, we experience abundance. So in some ways, that curiosity is not just kind of the mindset for innovation; it's the mindset for sustaining curiosity. It's one of those self-reinforcing loops. If you're curious and really open to what you might discover in relationship, it'll just make you more curious. And that's definitely been my experience of what's happening in the church. Like, you see these new innovative ministries emerge where people take a risk. They're curious about how a gourmet soup social enterprise can help people on ADP and also feed people, and suddenly it's scaling across the church. Or hundreds of examples of new innovative ministries that are emerging in the church right now. And it just kills me that much of the church is so focused on the part that's dying that they don't experience the joy, and so they stay in the fear. Anyway, I'm not sure if that was actually an answer to your original question, but it becomes possible. Like, I think the relationship is the gift. And that's where we experience abundance, and curiosity opens the door to that. So
I think what we've just gone through is just understanding that through this journey that we are not alone, right? So we really understood that curiosity is being in relationship with each other. And so because we are not alone, it doesn't sound that scary to be curious. I mean, when we first started this conversation, we talked about, we need validation. And it's this big leap of faith, and it's really scary. But actually in the journey, it started with fear, and then it went into faith, and it ended in joy. And so that's just such a remarkable through even this conversation that we allowed ourselves to be changed, starting from fear to faith to joy, and how curiosity doesn't seem that scary at all. And so you're probably wondering right now, well, how do I know if I'm curious? How do I get started? And guess what? Here's a surprise. You're here, you're listening already, you're already curious.